What's up, my wizards? It's Dev from The Place with special guest Julie. You're never here anymore, Julie. But in any case, today we're looking at not only the most budget deck of the season so far, excitement, but also like my favorite deck to mess around with in Arena right now. So let's check out Red Black Menagerie. You know what I like about this deck? It's simple and clean like Kingdom Hearts. Please get that reference. But in any case, there's like nothing but 4-ofs in the main deck. It's only like $35. The numbers are round, 20 creatures, 16 spells, 24 lands. It just feels good. Are you done, Julie? Didn't last long. But in any case, it just feels good after like weeks of building a bunch of meta decks that are like $250 and up. And have a bunch of like 1 and 2-ofs. It feels really good to play with the deck. That's like just really simple in construction, but don't let that fool you. It's actually a really, really good deck, and obviously the star of the show here is Gruesome Menagerie, a card that is much better than I once thought it was. Well, Julie left, but Ziggy came by, so don't worry. You're going to still have a cat to watch and comment about and all that, but in any case, Gruesome Menagerie is awesome. I'll reiterate how good this card is compared to my initial expectations. This allows us to sometimes get more mana value out of the graveyard than we put into the card. That's good. Most of our creatures, not quite all, but most of our creatures, either have haste or an enter the battlefield trigger so we can go ahead and get value out of them the turn we return them to the battlefield, which is actually really important. And just, all else fails, getting 2 to 3 cards out of your graveyard with this is really good card advantage in the mid or late game. And yeah, by the way, you can get less than 3 cards out of your graveyard. Like if you don't have a 1-drop in your yard, it's totally legal just to get 2 creatures. Obviously, you usually want to wait until you can get all of the required creatures or available creatures out of your graveyard for this. But sometimes you can just finish the game off by getting a 2 and a 3-drop back. And really, that's how we're going to use this card in the red-black deck. Now, Gruesome Menagerie, you could build a white-black, vampires or knights list and end up using Gruesome Menagerie at the top of your curve. You could build a green-black list, which you've already seen a couple of times in this format. Menagerie is awesome at the top end of your curve if you're playing like Supplier, Glowspore Shaman, Plaguecrafter, all that. So, decent green-black deck you can build with this card right now, but if we're looking to build a budget list that we actually don't have to compromise too much on power level, I think red-black is the way to go because we're afforded a lot of really, really cheap red pieces right now that are low budget and yet have still proven their worth in Standard. But obviously, we got to play a lot of creatures in order to make this card actually worth it. So let's go ahead and run through those real quick. Starting with the 4 copies of Fanatical Firebrand. This is actually our only 1-drop. I know some people are going to want to play like 6 to 8 1-drops in this deck to make sure they maximize the value of Menagerie, but I would like to really prioritize getting 2 and 3 drops out of the graveyard. And you don't necessarily always have to return a 1-drop in order to make Menagerie worth playing. That said, I do want to play at least a playset of a 1-drop, and I think this is the one we want. It has haste, so if we get in the early game, it can go ahead and start cracking in as early as turn 1. It kills Llanowar Elves, it forces them to pay 4 life for a Adanto Vanguard sometimes. There's other 1-toughness creatures that this works against. But obviously, in the late game, if you return it with Menagerie, you can go ahead and start cracking in that turn. Can sacrifice for a damage to the head, add damage onto damage creatures already taken to finish it off. There's lots of stuff that Firebrand can do in this format, and if we're looking for any 1-drop to play in the deck, this is probably the one. But on to the 2-drops, starting with Viashino Pyromancer, which we're also going to play the playset. Again, we're playing playsets of literally every card in the main deck, so I don't have to tell you that. But Viashino Pyromancer is an awesome 2-drop in mono red decks right now. By Ziggy, I have a feeling he'll be back. I think he's just exploring the table. Hope you like his tail. In any case, Viashino Pyromancer is awesome in Standard, in mono red decks right now, period, already. So in a deck that gets to, return it on turn 5 or 6, it's even better, Sometimes these mono red decks just need that little last bit of reach to finish a game off, and if you're returning, a Fanatical Firebrand and a Viashino Pyromancer to the battlefield on turn 5 or 6, then sometimes, that's a lightning strike. That's like drawing a lightning strike. And sometimes that's all you need to finish the game off. And even though you can't sacrifice it to reliably get it into your graveyard the way you can with Firebrand, it still only has the 1 toughness. So El Diablo de Fuego is actually going to go into your graveyard before turn 5 in like 90% of games. Now we've got a couple of good options for other 2-drop creatures in the deck, but the one that I'd want to play the most is Dismissive Pyromancer. This card has just been really, really good. First of all, you can discard creatures to it a little bit more liberally, a little more freely in this deck because you know you'll just be able to menagerie them back into play eventually. So if you're looking for a specific card or a lightning strike, some reach of some kind, then sometimes you can discard a 3-drop creature or something. And just menagerie back into play so you don't actually lose any value on its first ability. That's awesome. And second of all, obviously, this can just sacrifice to kill big creatures and then just menagerie right back into play. Got a lot of Pyromancers in this deck if you haven't noticed, but don't dismiss this one because both abilities are relevant to Gruesome Menagerie. The card is good enough and already shows up in enough, burn list, mono red list, wizards list for that matter, and that's one of the reasons that it's here. It's because it is a wizard, so keep that in mind, but there's also that little bit, but it's just a good card in and of itself. Bears with upside tend to be awesome, and there's no difference here. But now it's time for a card you don't see every day, and that's Get to Journey Mage. I'm actually playing all 4 of this, too. This is a wizard, so this gives us 12 total wizards for the Wizard's Lightning that you probably know that we're playing right by now. It's the only wizard payoff, but this makes it a little bit more attainable. Plus, this has a sweet Into the Battlefield trigger, especially if you got a Pyromancer or Dismissive Pyromancer on turn 2. Chances are you're going to get a wizard on turn 2, so this is great on turn 3 if you're able to keep your turn 2 wizard alive. Plus, this is obviously great to return with the Gruesome Menagerie. Imagine returning a Fanatical Firebrand and a Viashina Pyromancer and a Get to Journey Mage with your Gruesome Menagerie. That's like a Lava Axe that leaves bodies on the battlefield. That is a crazy play. You can trade it in combat after the first time you play it. Very freely. That's one good thing about Menagerie I haven't mentioned yet, is if you can't attack profitably, then you can trade in combat and block a lot more profitably against other aggressive decks, because you're just going to Menagerie this stuff back into play anyway. So if you end up, Menagerie this back into play and end up with 4 total damage over the course of a game, that is really, really good, especially if you can, add 2 Viashino Pyromancers over the course of a game to that damage, or 2 Fanatical Firebrands over the course of the game to that damage. The things add up really, really quick, not to mention the burn suite that we're playing. So pretty easy to get 20 damage in this deck. Again, burn decks suffer from the problem of not being able to do that last 3 to 5 damage, and Gruesome Menagerie, along with creatures like this and Pyromancer, really help you get that, that last haymaker to finish things off. But we're not quite done with the creatures yet, because I'm also going to work in 4 copies of Plaguecrafter. We got some black mana laying around in the deck. I don't want Gruesome Menagerie to be like the only black card we play. And if we're looking for good budget, 3-drop options for a red-black deck, especially a deck that's trying to play creatures with ETB triggers anyway, then there's really not a whole lot of better stuff than Plaguecrafter, especially for this deck. It looks a little bit off-theme because we're mostly trying to burn the opponent, but one thing this allows us to do is, first of all, burn out all of our opponent's little guys, and then use Plaguecrafter to kill a bigger creature because they have to sacrifice it to Plaguecrafter. So that's one thing, but this also allows us to, use our burn to hit the opponent in the head more often because we have this guy to take out, creatures. It's also really good against control and sometimes makes them sacrifice Teferi or just got a card or whatever, so got to work that in too. There's just kind of no situation in which Plaguecrafter is a bad card, so we'll play the play set. But let me take you through the spell suite to finish the deck off here. And the spell suite is fairly wide, but not exactly varied. We're playing 4 copies of Shock, 4 copies of Lightning Strike, and 4 copies of Wizard's Lightning, like I mentioned earlier. And there's 12 Wizards in the deck. Why not play Wizard's Lightning, You could work in even more if you wanted to. I'll talk about that in a second. But Wizard's Lightning's kind of a no-brainer. It's just 1 mana very, very often in this deck. And being able to play Lightning Bolt in Standard is what you want to do. That's where you want to be. So even though it's a fairly expensive card, actually, it's like $225, and it's one of the most expensive cards in the deck, it's definitely worth getting your hands on for it. Because this is just it's the single best burn card in the format right now, if you can facilitate it, and we can. As far as Shock and Lightning Strike, though, this is just extra burn to the face, extra creature removal, extra reach in the late game. Is just really not much I have to say. I think we should play sets of both of these. There are 24 lands in this deck. I wanted to play an extra land or 2, usually mono red, that looks really similar to this, plays like 22 lands. I think we have to play a couple of more because we're on a 5-drop and we need enough black sources to actually get to it by turn 5. We tried to pull that off here. We've still got 12 red sources that are untapped on turn 1 for Fanatical Firebrand or Shock or whatever. So we've got plenty of red sources on turn 1, but we've still got, Dragonskull Summit, even Cinder Barons, which is a better card than it looks like. Usually you won't want to tap land in a deck like this, but you can play this on turn 3 or turn 4 and still get another spell in, and it doesn't really penalize you that much. But that said, when Blood Crypt, the red-black shockland, comes out in the next set, then this deck will actually get just far and away much, much better. Now, to continue the simplicity, here's a 5-card sideboard right here. Not really much in the way of, explanation I need to be doing here. Lightning Mare is in there against the control matchup. It's a great card against them. They can't counter it. They can't block it with Nezahal or Dream Eater or Chromium or any of the cards that they like to finish the game off with in the creature department. So it's just great against them. They have to remove it, or even if you Menagerie into play, it might not have haste. But on the next turn, it's going to swing for a lot of damage if you have enough lands to pump into it. There's also Knight of Malice in there against any of the white decks that play like Conclave Tribunal or Seal Away or Baffling End or any of the white removal spells right now. This is just a great card against, so we'll play that. Burglar Rat is in there also against the control decks. This is actually really a decent card. I've actually seen this in the main deck of a couple of green-black decks on MTGO, and it works really well against a lot of control decks. And it's not like Nullhide Ferox is having the impact that everyone thought it was going to have. So you can play Burglar Rat fairly guilt-free right now, and it's great for getting answers out of opponents' hands. So not a bad sideboard card. But that does it for the sideboard creatures. You'll note that I'm also playing 2 copies of Lava Coil, which is kind of expensive right now. It's like 75-80 cents for a coil, but it's also a great answer against Rekindling Phoenix specifically, and a bunch of other 4 toughness dudes that I don't necessarily always want to have to sacrifice Pyromancer to kill. So there's that, but there's also Price of Fame. Now you could play, I guess, Vraska's Contempt or something in this slot if you really had the money or you wanted to. But Price of Fame is great against Lyra Dawnbringer, which is either going to be in the main deck or come in from the sideboard of a lot of decks, and is very, very good against us. We can Menagerie on turn 5 all we want, but if they can just attack with Lyra, they're going to get back most of the life, if not all or more of the life that we were able to deal to them in damage. So we've got to be able to deal with Lyra. Either Fight with Fire or Price of Fame, they're both good options, but if we're looking to take out specifically a legendary like Lyra, or Shalai, or Aurelia for that matter, then Price of Fame is great. Just 2 mana, and we get a Surveil to help close the game out, find that reach piece that we need. So Price of Fame is just awesome, as far as I'm concerned, against cards like Lyra Dawnbringer, which we absolutely do need to carry an answer to in the board. But before we get to the power rankings, let's talk about some cards I didn't play in this deck that you could play, and you wouldn't really have to sacrifice too much on the budget. If you wanted to work in another 1-drop, there's always Get to Lava Runner. If you wanted another Wizard, this is not bad. We've got 16 spells in the deck. So, if you were able to, I think you might have to cut a Lightning Strike or a Shock or something. Maybe go down to 2 Shock in order to fit this card, because I don't necessarily want to cut any of the creatures, but it would probably be worth it. You get another 1-drop creature for Gruesome Menagerie. And if you do Menagerie it into play, Menagerie counts towards its spell count. So that's kind of cool. You'll almost always bring this back as a 2/2 haste on Menagerie turns. That's not bad. You could probably work this in at little to 0 opportunity cost. But there's also Torch Courier. This is an interesting card for the deck because it has haste, but you can also sack it to give a 2 or 3 drop that you bring back haste, which could be pretty good alongside Menagerie. And in fact, there are a lot of goblins that could work in this deck. This could just be a Goblin Menagerie deck, which is actually what I was building at first. I've been playing Goblin Instigator in the 2-drop slot on Arena for this deck because I didn't have enough wild cards for all 4 Dismissive Pyromancer. I think I'm only playing 2 Dismissive Pyromancer on Arena. And I didn't have enough uncommon wild cards for all 4 Plaguecrafter. So I've been playing some Goblin Instigator in the 2-drop slot, and it's fine. It's actually a pretty good card to return with Menagerie, or extend the game on turn 2, or against slow decks get in more damage. There's a lot of cool stuff that Instigator can do. But in a Goblin deck, you could obviously play Goblin Warchief. That would be really good with Menagerie. You can imagine turns where you bring back Warchief and a 2-drop and a 1-drop. You swing with all of them, and that's at least 5 damage. That'd be a great way to recover from a Cleansing Nova or Settle the Wreckage or whatever. So I like the idea of goblins. Let me put it that way. You get Crater Maker. That's a good card, period. And you can put it into the graveyard easily to then reanimate with Gruesome Menagerie. There's a lot of cool stuff about Crater Maker and just goblins in general in this deck. You could get Goblin Trash Master, because I don't know if you noticed, there's like no 4-drop cards in this deck. Usually you want to play, you want a double or triple spell. You want to play more than 1 spell on turn 4 in this deck, which is very easy to do, but if you wanted a 4-drop, you're playing Goblins, Trash Master would be awesome. That makes those Warchief Menagerie turns even better. So you could do that, and Goblins looks like a great way to play Gruesome Menagerie right now at a reasonable budget. You know, especially once we get Blood Crypt, it'd be easy to play Goblin Chain Whirler in this deck. Imagine how good Mr. Chains would be with Menagerie. So that's definitely a possibility. And there's even a couple of non-budget things I could see going in the deck. You know, Runaway Steamkin, giant target on its head. It's going to go into the graveyard at some point during the game, so Menagerieing it back, not a bad idea. But I actually really like Experimental Frenzy while we're on the subject of 4-drops. You know, if you're looking for a 4-drop to play, this would probably be a good one or two of. And in fact, you just, you know, start Arena with one Experimental Frenzy, or at least I did when my account reset. You know, I threw in an Experimental Frenzy. And the games where you do get that one copy are really good, so Experimental Frenzy could go in if you had a couple of copies or the money to order them, because they are kind of sliding up there in the price. And here are your power rankings right here. A final score of 61 for a $35 deck. That's really good. I mean, note that, again, this deck plays a lot of very popular standard cards. You know, it plays the whole, almost, the entire Wizard suite that we're seeing. Shock, Lightning Strike, Wizard's Lightning. I mean, this is almost just the mono red deck. It adds Plaguecrafter and Gruesome Menagerie. And Menagerie, again, is just great for creating the late game value that this deck just does not usually have. You know, I've seen people add, obviously Flame of Keld is very popular in this deck, for the extra damage and the, you know, the card advantage it gets you on you know, Chapter 2 of Flame. But Gruesome Menagerie, although you have to wait until turn 5 to get it, it gets you both the card advantage and that sort of explosiveness all in the same turn. And if you haven't, you know, finished the game off by turn 5 anyway, Gruesome Menagerie, again, great way to do it. So we are much more resilient than a deck like this usually has any business being, and that's the #1 reason to play Menagerie here. Because they're at 5, and whoops, you know, Fanatical Firebrand, Pyromancer, and Journey Mage all come into play at the same time, and it's just, it's GG, kid. So just try this thing out. You know, what do you got to lose? $35. You probably already own the majority of these cards, but just in case you don't, do the usual thing. Click on the first link in the description down there. Head over to TCG Player, because even though this is a pretty budget deck, you don't want to overpay for it. You don't want to pay $50, $60 for this deck, like you will on some sites. I won't name names, but on TCG Player, it's going to be, you know, the cheapest place you'll find this deck online. So if you want to try this thing out for F&M, happy Friday, by the way, or just on Arena, which is where I've been playing it. It's a great deck on Arena from what I could tell so far. Then just, you know, give it a shot. Click the first link in the description. I guess you don't have to do that for Arena, but if you want to play the deck in paper, click the first link in the description, head over there to my buddies at TCG Player and try this thing out. I guess if you did want to play it on Arena, though, there's only like 12 rares in the main deck. There's like 16 commons. So it's just really not hard to build. Again, you know, my account just reset. And without spending a whole bunch of gems or anything, I was able to very easily build something really close to this on Arena. Again, I played Instigators instead of all the dismissive Pyromancers and Plaguecrafters, but still plays very similar to the idea behind this deck. So if you wanted to build it on Arena, it's really easy to do there too, and it's a profitable deck. I've won a bunch of games with this thing already. So give this thing a shot if you can. It's a fun deck to play, and it gives a pretty familiar deck another dimension that it's sorely needed. So give this thing a shot. And while you're at it, don't forget to do the YouTube stuff. You know, call to action. You know what time it is, guys. Just like the video if you can. Share it around. I think this is the first real budget deck of the season. It feels really good to do a budget deck again. Because, again, I've just been doing decks that I feel are way too expensive. So share this thing around. Make sure everybody gets in on the budget love. And click subscribe if you haven't done that yet. Make sure you hit the bell for the notifications. Aside from that, make sure you join the Patreon if you haven't done that yet. It's just $1 a month to vote on what decks you want to see next. I took the reins for this one. I've been having so much fun with the deck lately, and I have enough faith in it, too, that I really wanted to put this deck online as quickly as possible. So I took the reins for this one and didn't hold a vote, but I still am doing 2 votes a week. And by the time I put this video up, there's going to be another poll to vote in. So get on over there, pledge your $1 a month. It's really not too much to ask, I hope. I know it's hard out there. Pledge your $1 a month and vote on what you want to see next. But anyway, tapped out for now, so I've been Deb from The Place. Thanks for watching, my wizards. There's a lot of craziness out there in the world right now, but just make sure that you spread love and you be kind.